Hey, everybody. Welcome to the challenge. I am John Chapman, the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. And we are endeavoring to bring back religion and politics to the dinner table. Me specifically, I bring Jesus with me. He paid for me, so he owns me, and I love to follow him as a result of that. So forever grateful by the work of Jesus Christ in my life. And today we got an interesting conversation to go on. I want to first encourage you. We got several people on already. Go ahead and go over to that live chat during the program and get involved in the conversation. You guys I love the information, the thoughts, and the ideas that have been coming from each of you when we get involved in those chats. We appreciate that very much. Also, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, White Dove Ministries. You can check out what they're doing, including what we're doing here today at whitedoveministries.net. We do this every Wednesday live. And as we continue to build, there could be more opportunities. We're looking forward to doing this. We have many shows prior to this that you can check out on Rumble. And continued ones coming up. So on Wednesdays, if you want to carve out a little time at 4 p.m., we would love to have you here in the conversation. So my co-host is, like we all have to, work for a living. So he's unable to be with us today. But next time, I'm pretty confident we will get him going there again. So we're looking forward to that. An interesting article came up in the Iowa Standard. And this is fascinating to me because we are talking about the idea of healthcare. We are talking about what has happened to our rights with healthcare, and how is it that the hospitals have now developed, it would seem, or clinics or physicians, and we're going to talk about all three of those, whether or not they have the right to deny healthcare service for any reason. But in particular, this is around the vaccine. This is around getting vaccines. And who among us didn't get vaccines as a kid before we went to school? I mean, I understand that. But what we're needing to talk about today is there's a lot of things that have changed over the years now in regards to this, but in particularly the last 4 years in regards to vaccines. And the idea that somebody can be turned away medical care. And again, I'm going to break that down. I'm not going to sensationalize that because there's areas of medical care that apparently are still available. But when it comes to basic medical care, when I say that, I'm talking about getting your physical for your kid, for example. And that's the article that came to my table last night, which I found very interesting. And this is from and I'm really enjoying this. This has been a good source for us. And I would encourage anyone Iowan out there who's looking for another source of information, wherever you get your information from. I'm really learning to appreciate the Iowa Standard. I think now, I haven't read every article they've done every day, all the time. But what I'm saying is all the articles that I've read for them thus far, I go, you know what? That is information I've been looking for because I think this is a balance that we're looking for in information. When information becomes the same and from the same source all the time, you begin to think that's all there is. And then you find out, you know what? There's somebody else out there thinking probably like you're thinking, which is why I really appreciate this organization. The guy that runs the Iowa Standard, I think, is doing a tremendous job. And this is the article that's from that. And again, if you're just joining us, jump over there to the live chat on Rumble, get involved in the conversation. We'll get with you during the conversation. I got only so many hands here and a couple of things going on, but we will respond to those thoughts there too. So this is interesting. Here we go. And this is our food for thought for the day. This is where we're going to get challenged because I think what we're seeing here is a result of the initial idea during the Obama era, which is to mandate, and it was at the time by law, insurance, medical health care for everybody, a nationalized health care option. And I think many of you remember that. We have it available to us now. I, for one, now this is just me. This is just my decision. At the moment, I do not partake of that. I use the privatized source. It is more expensive, but here's one of the reasons why. And I don't know that I'll be able to do that for long because as it begins to drift more and more towards nationalized health care, personally, I think that's a problem. It's a huge problem from a national level because that's injecting an idea into a nation that will make it unhealthy. And I'm going to show you why I believe that. Because it takes people who are unable to have health care. It purchases them health care by demanding that it is a right. So now those people who have just felt that, you know what, by my choice, by my effort and responsibility, I'm going to have health care for my family. But now it's those people who have decided through their work and efforts to obtain this by their own choice that now this money has to come from for everybody to have health care. And we're going to show you some real lies that were said that were said and told to sell the original national healthcare program, because we know what it was sold on, right? Everybody has the right to healthcare, and apparently, and this is always true when you live on this planet, you try to fix problems with better or lesser problems, which still create other problems. Right? So if you're on the planet, you're trying to fix problems with things that are lesser problems, but they still bring problems and eventually turn into a bigger problem yet. That's what we're going to talk about. Says here in Madison County, in their healthcare system here, this is an affiliate of Mercy One. I think we've all been to some sort of Mercy One before, and I'd be curious too to hear from you on if you have had an incident where you felt you got subpar healthcare or you got no service because you didn't comply with a particular ideal. And that's what's going on here. So, this article from the Iowa Standard: mother told unvaccinated child can no longer be patient at Madison County Memorial Hospital Clinic. The article goes on to state an Iowa woman took her child in for an athletic physical but walked out upset at what transpired during the physical. According to the mother, the nurse practitioner who saw her child for the physical. So, okay, this is just a baseline physical for athletics in school. The family, according to the mother, the nurse practitioner who saw her child for the physical informed them that the child needed a vaccine for tetanus, meningitis, and HPV. The family was fine with the tetanus vaccine, but didn't wish to receive shots for meningitis and HPV. As soon that was said, the nurse practitioner immediately asked why the mother felt that way and if she had done her research. Now, I'm going to stop right there for just a second. Okay. When you talk about, so this is a nurse practitioner. Okay. The nurse practitioner has no authority over the child. The parent comes in with the responsibility of the child. They are simply advocating a basic physical for their child. They've driven in at their expense. That child goes to school at their tax-paid expense. That child eats at the parent's expense. That child is insured generally at the parent's expense. All travel for that child is at the child's expense. And the physician assistant says, they ask why the mother felt that way. I want to tell you, first of all, that has already crossed the line. Because what I'm going to share with you is that this medical ideal of Medicare for everybody and healthcare for everybody is only a religious belief system based on what you want to believe on something different in your life than somebody else's. This practitioner did not. Now, if there's one thing I don't believe the practitioner had the right to do, was ask why. And let me say, I don't know what I would have said at that point, because that would have touched a nerve with me to have a practitioner ask me why, that the mother felt that way. So feelings and all of a sudden needed to be a part of this, or just the truth of what that mother believed and her own personal responsibility to her child. Now, remember, parents are responsible for the upbringing of their children. And this is yet another opportunity for the government to gain access to come between that child and the parent. That could be I'm floating off to the side a little bit with that, but I am, if anything, it bothers me immensely for a nurse practitioner to say, why do you feel that way? And have you done your research? Have you done your research? They followed up, the practitioner follows up by stating that the child, oh, excuse me, the mother says the child does not receive vaccines. Oh, excuse me, the practitioner said if the child does not receive vaccines, they couldn't attend school. And the mother cites a religious exemption. And then the nurse practitioner disappeared, obviously to check with a or something like that, supervisor. And when she returned, this is what it said. She said it is policy that unless the child receives the meningitis vaccine, they can no longer be a patient because they believe in keeping the community safe. And I'm going to show you a line here that this is a faith-based system, so that when the religious ideals of doctors, CDC, and the WHO all get together for their belief system, they're believing that what they believe is better for everybody, but independent thinking, individual family responsibility no longer complies or lines up with that. And that's a real problem. This really denotes, it really shows us that what's going on in our country has long been in bear, in that we are losing the independence as a responsible citizen, and people who have a different belief system want to take that money and use it for their serving belief system in the name of, well, what we're doing is good. So that's a problem. And so I want to say, so I read that, and we're talking about what's actually going on with the medical community in regards to this. And one of the emphases that I need to put on this is that we need to decide as parents and a community, a government ideal, which is really based on any religious ideal. Your faith in something causes you to do something. And if your faith is in the government, it's going to be your highest authority. If your faith is in God, then he is going to be your highest authority. And now you have to live on this planet with that in mind. Unfortunately, one of the things that also means is that if you believe in eternity and that there is a way to get there, in particular through Jesus Christ, then your time here on earth is just a matter of comfort or less comfort until eternity comes. That's just true. But if you're going to function within society, those who are Christians ought to believe that that function comes from a universal source, which is God's Spirit living inside of you, which causes the agreement of people to honor one another and do well with one another because the belief system is the same. When that belief system changes, what I want to say is you have the abortion rights activists out there, you've got the gay and lesbian community out there, and they're all crying for their own rights, what they believe they should do. So what happens is when we give our responsible efforts in the form of money to the government, those who have a different belief system now, through that, even inadvertently, are in opposition to you, and you no longer get certain base care. And the reason that's a big deal is because Obamacare was sold on it being health care for everybody. What they didn't tell you is a concept that I learned as a child growing up. And this concept is this. I learned it from my dad really well. I can even think of a particular incident in my head. I won't bother you with the details of it, but the bottom line is this. I think many of you have heard this idea before. My house, my food, my room that you sleep in, my bed that you're resting in, my equipment that you have in your room, because I'm the paying one. I'm the one who handles all the broad care through my effort. And what people were not told, and although many of us understood this, when it went to Obamacare, that means the government now gets to say, my house, my ownership, it's for the whole, but we are the parent figure, specifically father figure. We are the provider for everybody. So now we get to make that decision. So it took the authority from parenting away from parenting and hands it to the authority of the government. And that has infiltrated into the medical system, which is now a mix mash of privatization and government medical community. And so now what that has done is shifted the responsibility and power control from individuals being personally responsible to the government say we'll be responsible. But the problem is, and I believe this with all my heart, this is what begins to happen. The government now has control and is authorizing itself family intervention, right? It's coming and saying, oh, no, families don't get to, parents don't get to decide. And I'm not talking about those abusive situations. Then it should be another family member actually moving in on. If you got child abuse going on, man, it should be another brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, an uncle, an aunt that are moving in on that situation. They should be the ones taking care of it. And when families say, well, that's none of our business, well, then that gives the government authorization to come and do that through a tax system that pays an institution to come in and do exactly that. We're seeing the same thing happen in the medical community. That's what I believe. That's what I believe I'm seeing happen. They say this is what we're going to do because this is ours. And we've, in many ways, handed it to them. And that is sad. But I think, and this guy, I'll tell you what, my ear's been towards him. There's a lot of things on policy he and I don't agree with. But RFK has this short Facebook interview that I found very interesting. It also came in my feed last night. I'm going to share it with you. So hopefully you can hear it well. It's the first time we've done this. So tune in, listen in here. I'm going to get my levels adjusted. And I want you to hear what RFK is doing and sharing with this interview in regards to vaccinations, children, parenting, and the motivation behind why the doctors would have this done. So check this out. Listen here for just a second. I'm going to be right back. It's a few minutes, so just kind of bear down and check out what RFK has to say. I'm kind of on board with this guy. Listen up.
You're a parent and you want to be a good parent, you need to do your own research about everything today because everybody's lying to you. Typical pediatrician's office makes about 50% of its funding comes from vaccines, not actually from selling the individual vaccines, from the traffic. And today, every kid goes to the doctor at least 10 times to get their vaccines. And that foot traffic in and out of the office is a major part of the business plan for the pediatrician office. And they're also then rewarded by Blue Cross Blue Shield, which has a reward schedule for pediatricians who vaccinate 80 or 85% of the kids in their office, get these giant bonuses, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they make, making sure that 85% of the kids are vaccinated. And that's why they throw you out of the office if you fight back. It's not because they care so much about your particular kid. It's that you'll throw off the metrics and you'll lose them their bonuses. Part of the responsibility of being a parent is, unfortunately, is to not trust everything your doctor says and to understand that the medical.
I want to point out there that he doesn't say don't trust your doctor. Did you hear that? Did you hear everything he was talking about in there? And he was talking about the percentage of income, bonuses and kickbacks that's on a schedule for getting those children's vaccines in. And you might be able to, you might sit back and you go, hey, you know what? Well, you know what? Vaccines saves lives. Well, it's a fact that vaccines have saved some lives. And it's a fact that vaccines have killed other lives. But that's the side that's not sold. And so I really appreciate when RFK does this interview. I think it's not the two things that I hear in this that I think are extremely important, because the government, here's the first one. Well, let me stick with this. I'm going to start with the other idea. I was going to give this one second, but I'm going to give it first here. The first thing that I think is so important that he says that I agree with entirely is if you're a good parent today, you need to do your research. You need to do your research. And the second thing of that, he says, is you need to not, he doesn't say don't trust your doctor. He says don't trust everything they tell you. Don't trust everything they tell you. Do you know where a statement like that comes from out of an individual like RFK? It comes from the inherent belief system that he believes individuals should be free. And if you have been guilted into believing everything your doctor says because they have a DR dot in front of them, you are turning over the responsibility of your parenting in an information world that allows you to research things. You should be allowed to go in and say, I'm not getting such and such a vaccine because of the research that I have done. Now, the medical community might argue, well, yes, but that research means that it's really better for a higher percentage. Well, in a free country, you can go in and say, well, even the small percentage is causing me to say, no, no, thank you. I'm not doing this. For those of you who have just joined us, please jump over there. Go ahead and like and share the challenge with John Chapman, the voice of one crying in the wilderness here, and join us on live chat. Get involved in this. Perhaps you've had a situation similar, got a little bit of space in there, and you can type that in, or things that you've been seeing happen in regards to, and in this particular case, the vaccine, this child is refused if they don't get, I mean, they're offered 3 vaccines. Tetanus is one of them, and that the parents said, yeah, get the tetanus shot. But the other 2, no. The other 2, no. You, in a free society, should very easily, because those children are born by you and the responsibilities on you, you have and will always have the right to say no. Now, I'm going to step out of the vaccine thing here for a second and say that I'm going to point out that once I'm a pretty big when you take a look at the time and the era that Obamacare came through and people started being able to obtain it, and the big red flag showed up when suddenly in that same era it became the law. Remember when you didn't have to buy medical insurance? That's because there wasn't a belief system that says medical assistance is a right. Healthcare is a right. What I'm gonna suggest here is that healthcare has become the new form. Healthcare and government obtaining of higher taxes through scandalous ways is actually government greed. We all talk about, well, yeah, you know about corporate greed that's going on. Look at the corporate greed that's going on. I'm going to suggest the government is filled with greed. And when you're down as many trillions of dollars they are in debt, we have so much that is unfunded in this country, they're going to obtain control. We got to get something done. And the only way we can do that is get more money. Now, you and me in our houses, we look around and we go, oh my gosh, I got to get that done. And the only way is well, let's see, I should run over to my neighbor and say, he just owes me taxes. Or maybe I should go over to that sounds like gangs in New York City running into those shops and saying, look, we'll protect you, but you got to pay us money coming out of here. I think I should run to all my neighbors and go, you know what? Tell you what, I'll keep an eye out on the neighborhood for you, but it's going to cost you, man. It's going to cost you some taxes, and I'm going to need to have that money from you, man. And that's what the government's doing. My producer said this. I thought this was just absolutely fantastic. I think it falls in this category. She called it the government Ponzi scheme. And I would have to agree, because you're promised a return on your investment, and it's sold as everybody getting medical care. And now, as faithful people like the Iowa Standard are pointing out here, look, healthcare is being denied. Now, truth of it is the law has been shifting to allow them to deny this basic care as long as it is not emergency based. So even though a letter was sent to this family in regards to them not being able, here it is. Here was the letter that was sent back. This was the quote from the Iowa Standard in this article in regards to the hospital towards this mother who said, no, I don't want 2 of the 3 vaccinations. Remember, she accepted 1, but, come on. It says the hospital, the clinic writes, we strongly advocate for the vaccination of children and young adults according to the schedule recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That's the CDC. That is the underly honest, not always faithfully truthful group we have learned to know and love. The CDC. They're just blurting out information on a religious foundation called science. And by the way, the problem with the religion of science is it can change the next day, if not the next 30 years. the religion of believing in Jesus Christ never changes because he says he is the Lord God and he changes not. Let me just get that out there, that for those people who think that people actually believe and know and in the hope of the truth of the eternal because of the work that Jesus Christ has done, at least they're secure on a truth that has never changed for over 2,000 years through Christ and through the promise of Father God, Yahweh himself, since Genesis. That promise has been mandated. That has been stated. He's going to fulfill that promise. But what is interesting to me is that now people are, through fear, going, hey, you need to get your shots. This is going to save everybody. This is going to be the best healthcare possible. Well, you have to advocate that. If you don't believe in Jesus, please, if you say, hey, I'm a Christian, but man, we got these shots. Well, we're all going to die. And then we're all going to be raised in Christ through him. And then we're going to be judged at that point. So whether I get a shot or don't get a shot, I should have the freedom to do that. And I should decide if I'm paying for it or not. So what's interesting here is that in this letter from the clinic, it says that there is a schedule recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Do you remember what I just posted to you from RFK? And he said there is a schedule given to Blue Cross Blue Shield for the vaccines for the doctors to receive their kickback. This is a sales market. And when you say this is for the health of everybody, I just want to say this. If you really believe it's for the benefit of everybody, not one taxpayer should pay for it, and the government shouldn't have to write a check. It should just be a complete volunteer basis. Complete volunteer basis, if that's what you're actually advocating for, that this should be for everybody. If you want to prove to me you are not, quote unquote, in it for the money. And so when doctors start saying, well, yeah, you should really get this done, I want to say, oh, really? What's your research? And what's your motive behind it? As a matter of fact, I think anytime a doctor says, hey, we need you to get these vaccines, we should be able to require them to give us the paperwork to the amount of money they'll be receiving as a result of my decision. Because we have to sign waiver forms to make them not responsible for any incident that occurs. We should, by law, say, all right, before I go forth with this, first, you need to tell me what by dollar quantification are you receiving for your recommendation? Yeah, well, we've studied the research. No, I don't want to know the research. I want to know how much money you're getting. I do not want to know the research. I want to know how much money you're getting because the research is being avoided. There's actually now peer-reviewed documentation that's been released and is beginning to circulate around and say, hey, and you know what? Us conspiracy theorists, we knew this 4.5 years ago. Guess what? The vaccines, which are untested, and presumably people say that they have now been authorized. What research I have done, and I'm going to keep looking for because I like to be wrong when it's the truth. It's still under an emergency use, which hasn't existed now since year one of the Biden administration. So effectively, it's saying it's unlawful. It's not been okayed by the CDC. It's still under emergency use authorization, which is no longer in place, which means officially it's illegal. So how much again is your doctor getting for insisting on this? And now you can send somebody out the door and say, hey, we can't give you care because of what? Somebody's not getting a kickback? Is that the real reason that this is happening? Yeah, this is a farce when we strongly advocate for the vaccination of children and young adults according to the schedule recommended by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Vaccination is viewed as a crucial health promoting intervention. That could be, but you can't force it on me. You might believe that because now you're receiving the dollars. But now I'm not believing that because it is not panning out that way all the time. And you are now taking my money, tax dollars for localized clinics within the state of Iowa, and then also forced insurance, which is now, it's a penalized tax. I purchased insurance, redid an insurance policy for my wife and I just 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And the guy just showed me, he said, yeah, if you make this much money, you get tax penalized. And I go, well, wait a minute. I thought this was insurance. I thought this was health insurance. Well, it's government health insurance. Oh, that's why it's so cheap. Well, what's my deductible? Oh, the same amount of money would cost me to privatize in that high deductible. So the bottom line is either I'm getting to choose to spend my money and how I spend that money, which puts me in a position to argue what I will or won't have done at the hospital. But now, when it's been governmentalized, my money is being utilized in the form of a tax penalty, be thrown into a pot and say, well, we actually speak to a higher power called the CDC. Well, I have something, and it's inarguable. I have something of a higher power, and I actually don't like using that phrase. He's the highest power, and his name is Jesus Christ, and eternity is just around the corner, and I'm really excited about that, and I hope you get to know him too and believe in the work of the cross for your own sins so that you are not also captivated by the lies coming your way, and you too can be free, because Jesus said that is what he came to do. Now, I'm going to continue in this because this is not the only. Now, what I'm talking about here again is you got to understand there's a shift going on. There's this paradigm shift that's going on, and it always has to do with whether the government is going to be in control of what's going on or whether we're going to be in control of what's going on. The more the government has to be in control of what is going on is actually an inherent. It's a revealing. Let me say, is a revealing of the condition of a nation. More government responsibility means less responsibility is being picked up by its individual citizenry. So the citizens of this country, as we become less and less responsible, give up more and more and more of our freedoms to be more and more comfortable to not be responsible by handing the responsibility over to the government, which is now doing what I would say a form of corporate greed, as it were. And this is not I'm not the originator of the statement, as all of you know. If any corporation ran its business the way the government did, the United States government did, they would not have lived. They would not have survived. They would not have carried on in the way they were able to do so. But in the meantime, what we're experiencing right now is this transition that's going on between the government and the people and the authority by which these things are beginning to happen. You know, it wasn't all that long ago when people understood, you know what? How is it that they understood that healthcare was not a right? You were thankful to have whatever healthcare that you could. And the reason that was the case is that people also had a stronger fear and confidence of what may be when they were dead, an eternal idea, and the importance of having an eternal idea. And I'm going to tell you right now in this program, it's the single most important idea you must have and hold to. If you are not convinced of what and where eternity is and how to obtain a security in that eternity, whether it's with God or separate from God, healthcare has to be a right for you. And the idea of healthcare being a right is an impossibility because everybody dies. That's the second time I've said that. It is, you can't guarantee. You can't go into a hospital because you sign off saying, well, these problems could happen. So I have the right to come in to get healthcare that they promise might not do anything for me. It might not save my life. It might not prolong my life. I know many people were very hurt by the fact that when some people got COVID and some people died from COVID. That is true. But the death of freedom was the greater risk at this, because now are we lamenting in the same way the actual documented deaths of people by the vaccine? And as the research continues to come out and we find out that yes, and there's actually an admittance by the vaccine maker, which is why the Child Protection Act was put in many, 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 many years ago because of the dangers of not fully tested vaccines. There's dangers in them anyway, especially the ones that contain mercury. And so if a mother comes in there and says, well, you know, I've read some research and there's mercury in these and I'm not comfortable with that. Or I found out that, and by the way, it's a government statistic. You can go there and find out who was passed from the COVID vaccine. You can go in there and look at direct deaths from it. And how is it then that we are not allowing a mom to go, well, that's a chance I don't want to take. Please just give my kid a physical. And that medical community is going, well, because of the way you believe, you're a threat to our belief. You don't fit in with our belief. You see how this is rolling? It's kind of crazy. And this is not the first time it's happened. Again, if you want to join us in the live chat here on Rumble, please join us there. We got a lot of good information up there for you to check out right there. I'd love to hear, give a short story. Has this happened to you? Have you been denied some sort of coverage, some sort of care because you did not comply to this? And again, when the government's paying for it, don't they kind of get to say? But don't you remember when they sold us that healthcare was for everybody? Do you remember that? That is what they sold to us. Come on. You knew it and I knew it all along. The government was not going to let us have the freedom by selling that to us. We absolutely knew that. So here's another article by the Iowa Standard that a similar thing. So they go on. It's a similar article, different family. It said, last week we told you about a family's experience at the clinic in Madison County. That's the article we just derived from. And again, you can go to the iowastandard.com and find these on there. This is just good, local, fascinating stuff that we need to be paying attention to. Just remember, because it's going on at the federal level and we don't agree with it, doesn't mean it's not sneaking in here in the state level. You absolutely need to be, as RFK said, if you're going to be a good parent, you need to do your own research. And he didn't say don't trust the doctor. He says don't trust everything they say. That means you're a free citizen with a head on your shoulders, with the ability to find out. And a lot of responsibility comes with that, don't you know? A lot of responsibility comes with that. But people are wanting to be less and less responsible, give that responsibility over to somewhere else. And then, by the way, when you live with a moral code that you're supposed to be very responsible for your family, that becomes difficult because now the burden gets shifted onto you. And the pressure is on you to try to escape that burden. I'm telling you, the chaos that we're actually living in today, people are not aware enough of. They're not. They're not aware enough of the absolute chaos that's going on and trying to exchange and take the weight of responsibility away from people who have it and then overburden them and force them into giving that up into the government. That's my thoughts on that. That's just the way that works. So the Iowa Standard has this other article, yet another family. This is interesting. I find this very interesting. It says that the Iowa Standard had been contacted by another family that was living in Winterset for 6 years, and they heard things about the clinic not accepting unvaccinated kids, but never thought much about it because they already had a doctor. But when conditions arose that were urgent, but not an emergency, okay, so urgent care. Have you ever been to a clinic and go, oh, we offer urgent care means you as an individual feel this needs to happen for yourself or a family member, urgent care. But when conditions arose that were urgent, but not an emergency, and this is where the new line has been drawn, the family utilized the clinic, whether it was an ear infection or a chin that had split open, the family found the help they needed at the clinic. But after a few visits, the family received a letter in the mail. Here we go again, from this clinic. It is the policy of the Health Trust Physicians Clinic and Early Medical Clinic that all patients receive the recommended childhood immunizations. There it is again. Recommended is the word they say. And then it goes on to say, due to our commitment to protect all our patients from vaccine preventable illnesses, it is an expectation that our patients will be immunized. Unfortunately, we cannot continue to provide care to your family if you choose not to immunize. Do you understand how that reads? First of all, it's recommended. But when I say recommended, I mean expected. And really, when I say expected, I mean required. And because I'm saying required, you will not have baseline urgent care. Now, I want to tell you there is a new directive I've been taking, and I think it's interesting because very often, not all people on the left, but it seems to me to be a leftist ideal to make fun of those people who prep or learn to do more things themselves for their own care. And I was raised in a family that had some basic knowledge of things. Parents had basic knowledge of first aid and these kinds of things that are actually have driven up the cost because we do go in for those urgent care things. I actually had a family member who would stitch people. So it's like, oh, you had an open wound. So he boiled the water and sanitized the wound and, stitched up the family member. You know what that cost? Needle and thread, my friend, and a little bit of time, love, and care. And these are the kind of things we're going in for urgent care for all the time. But what I'm also seeing is more people are willing to go, you know what? I think I can take care of this. Shoot, I keep super glue with me all the time now because most wounds that are opened up like that can be sanitized by being sealed down by the product in cyanoacrylate. And I've used it on several occasions to close my own skin down when I was bleeding. Works great. Didn't have to go to the doctors or anything. As a matter of fact, one time I cut myself pretty deeply with a razor blade, went into a walk-in clinic and they couldn't get it sealed up. So they put butterfly straps on it and it didn't work. That's when I started carrying super glue. And guess what? Closed it right up and it was all done. So they couldn't even take care of me in an urgent care clinic when I sliced my thigh open with a razor blade. So they're turning away care that I think people are going to start to go, and I think we should. I think we should help one another do it too. I found myself during the COVID era, we extended ourselves, the ministry extended itself as a help for people in care. And you know what? It worked. It worked. Now, there was still tragic cases that occurred in the meantime. But what I loved seeing together was people coming together for our love one for another. That is the family of God in the community, not expected on the medical community who then says, nah, we will, or that we won't. And so this is really sad to begin to see this. And I want to be very careful. I know that they by law still are required. Something's changed during the COVID era, but by law, I believe if there's an emergency, real genuine emergency care, you're in a car accident and have your arm severed, or you need a jump start in your heart because it's quit, or all these kinds of things, that still is required to happen. And that's wonderful. But if those are the only things they're going to do, why wouldn't that drive down the cost of insurance? Why wouldn't that drive down the cost of insurance? If the other thing, that's the only thing that they're going to be obligated to do, that can drive down the cost of insurance. If we start staying home and going, you know what, I can think I even lived in a family where a family member had their leg break and it was severe. And another family member, it was way out on a hike. Another family member came to their aid. And while they were still a little numbed up from the fact the break had happened, they were still on their adrenaline, right? That individual knew enough to help them get the bone snapped back straight and safely. You know, so everybody goes, oh, well, they don't know what they're doing. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's doing awesome. Man, it worked great. And then put the leg in an ice cold brook, got him in an ice cold brook, get the swelling down. So apparently urgent care could be done right then and there. And these are the kind of things that people are being rejected for. And here's the other problem. If you're not going to get your vaccines and therefore you can't go to school, well, the school systems are suffering already in the public eye. They are in mine. And they're becoming less trustworthy on themselves. They're obviously a part of a larger social system that's going on. And that's what the government does, is it ties in. Well, now we're talking about health and safety. They're actually talking about big pharma. Okay. They need to stop saying health and safety, because my producer was absolutely right. This is a government Ponzi scheme. They need money. They want to obtain that money. There's pharmaceuticals that our tax dollars are paying for to get paid billions of dollars in that for their corporate pocketbooks to be happening. And I got to tell you, I was never going to be that guy that was going to jump down some corporation's throat. The problem is when that corporation is saying, look, if you don't take this, everybody's going to die. Thank you for all the money. Thank you for all the money. That's a problem. And that's what's going on here. Why is it these two families said, hey, your kids can't participate in school. We won't take care of them here if you're not drinking the Kool-Aid and you're coming on board with the actual financial system of the money that we're needing to pay for all these vaccines and the more vaccines that are going on. So again, I'm going to advocate for something here really strongly for the doctors. Anybody who says, hey, we need to give you your vaccines, not a problem. How much money? And make them give all the percentages. That RFK video was very telling, anywhere from 65 to 85% of their total clientele. I need to know how much money you're going to make. If you get 65% of all the clients that come in here to get vaccines, how much money do you get from that? Not being a doctor, not just from your standard billing. And if it's 85%, how much more is that? So you tell me that, and then, we'll see. Maybe it's important for you to get this kickback from the pharmaceutical company. The fact that we can't understand or believe that the motive is absolutely on the macro, a very impure motive that's being brought on by the pharmaceutical companies, is an enigma to me. In the name of saving lives, which it is now proving, it has the opposite effect for others. And that is a problem. The entirety of this religious belief system that we see going on when this shifts over is opening up the door. Once again, it incentivizes for parents' responsibility to shift off of being parents and it causes us as a society to allow the CDCs of the world, the governments of our own country, the WHO to come and say, hey, here's what we think is best for your kid. We didn't birth them. We're not feeding them, although they're trying to do that. Well, we need more money in the schools to feed the kids. Well, the parents should be doing that. That's just how it is. And we don't want that responsibility anymore. So now are we no longer advocating for family? We're no longer advocating for the responsibility necessary to have that blessing as a family. And if the government wants that responsibility and we give them all the money to do it, what you are not going to have in the end is a family. You are no longer going to have a purpose as a man for why it is you're working and why that blessing should be coming to all your children. You are no longer going to have a purpose as a woman for why it is you're working your can off, whether it's at home, homeschooling, or sending your kids off to public or private school and then going to another job, or working all day in your house so that your family comes home for the purpose of being a strong family. That is work above all work. It is a lost art for that to be able to happen in families today. And when we lose that purpose, it is no wonder the families are falling apart right and left. And people are voting on, oh, you know what? We got to take care of the family. No, you are destroying the family by advocating, by being the parent and saying there's no longer a place for parenting. This clinic in Madison County, essentially because of a belief system they have, which authorizes kickbacks to the doctor to pay the vaccination crowd, that is those who produce it for payment, money, big money, huge money. They just said to these two ladies, you are not worthy of parenting. And I think that is criminal. I think that is absolutely criminal. And I think every one of you who has taken on the responsibility of being a parent, and RFK said it very well, if you're going to be a good parent, do your research. And number two, don't believe everything the doctors tell you. Why not believe some things, but do your research, since the responsibility lies with you. And there's no guilt, by the way, for making a right or wrong decision. Each one of us has to go to the information and decide for ourselves. This is a benefit and a responsibility of freedom, something that keeps being pulled from you all the time. But my encouragement to you is this. As you've been on board with this podcast, and I would love to hear in further comments here, both in live chat and in the future watching of this program, if you get a chance to, love to hear your story. Say, hey, this happened to me. Because one of the number one arguments that's going on is they're saying, well, they need to require the vaccinations because the hospitals were packed wall to wall with COVID patients. That's not an argument when the hospitals relieve half of their staff and shut down half of the facility. That's not a legitimate argument. You can't set half your staff home because you can't pay them, because there isn't money, because that system has stopped, and the only money you can make is from COVID patients. You should be thankful that's what you had in the hospital, COVID patients. But don't tell us those hospitals were packed when we all know I met many employees of that industry that retired early or they were let go because they didn't have the money to support them. Half of the hospitals were no longer usable. So what was left was considered packed. Every time they told you, oh, that hospital's packed, that's because there's only a third of it being used because of what's actually happening economically when we're reliant upon the money that's coming from the vaccines. We became dependent upon the vaccines. How can healthcare be a right when it can't guarantee your life? Jesus Christ came freely to make a payment that if you would believe in the work that he has done on the cross for your sin, then your life is guaranteed. And the hope of that is known because you have believed in his name and for his name's sake. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. This medical system is a religious ideal. And if they say it's based on science, mark my words, check it 5 years from now, that science is going to change. Check it 10 years from now, that science is going to change. Check it 20 years from now, that science is going to change Why am I continuing to be asked in a belief system that's not going to outlive me? I think that's a real problem. Hey, I want to thank you for joining me on the challenge today, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. And I want to say, yes, I do. It is a pleasure to serve the Lord. It is a pleasure to be with you. And I hope, yes, I do, that anything that's been said here today is a blessing to you. Check us out. We are sponsored by whitedoveministries.net. You can find out what's going on in there every Wednesday. Come join us again. Really appreciate the viewership today. A lot of activity going on there. I hope this has been a blessing to you. Next Wednesday, 4 p.m., come join us on the challenge. It's going to be great again. And I want to encourage you, what you believe, speak it out. Say it to a neighbor. Say it to a family member. Say it to your coworker. Open up your mouth and share your thoughts. Get into the conversation. Bring what you believe and the politics going on all around you back to the dinner table. This nation needs it. Your family needs it. And you need it. And I want to tell you, as always, as I sign off today, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord.